Namaskar. The second dry run before the vaccine rollout took place today across the country. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be interacting with chief ministers of states and chief ministers and administrators of union territories before the national rollout of this COVID vaccine. This interaction will take place on Monday. And the government also conducted the 8th round of talks with the agitating farmers that ended inconclusive. The next round is on the 15th of January. Our focus tonight continues to be on the U.S. transition of power. The Democrats calling for the invoking of Amendment 25 of the U.S. Constitution against the sitting President Donald Trump, the outgoing one, in fact, after members of his administration put in their papers. My name is Mark Lynn. Let's begin with the headlines. Before vaccination rollout against the COVID-19, Prime Minister to interact with chief ministers and lieutenant governors across the country on Monday. Operational preparedness reviewed through dry run across all states and union territories. Talks with farmers' organizations to continue. Next round of talks on January 15. Agriculture Minister expresses hope that a solution will be found soon, urges farmers' organizations to provide alternative proposals. Pakistan court sentences Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorist Zakirul Rahman Lakhvi to 15 years in jail for terror funding. The MEA says it is a farcical attempt to show compliance ahead of the FATF plenary next month, which could blacklist Pakistan. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden blames the outgoing President Donald Trump for the Capitol Hill violence. The Speaker of the lower house, Nancy Pelosi, says the 25th Amendment of the Constitution should be used to remove Trump. India to preside over 3 major subsidiary bodies of the UN Security Council. Bodies include Taliban Sanctions Committee, Anti-Terrorism Committee, and Libyan Sanctions Committee. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to inaugurate the 16th Pravasi Bharatiya Divas convention from Saturday. Suriname's President Chandrika Prasad Santokhi to be the chief guest. And Team India fights back in the Sydney Test, bundling Australia out for 338 runs in the first innings and ending day 2 with 96 for 2. Shubham Gill hits a half-century. Our top story, the U.S. President Donald Trump has called for action against those demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol and defiled the seat of American democracy. Interestingly, the Democrats hold President Trump directly responsible for what happened in the Capitol and have asked, in fact, for his removal from office by the Vice President under the 25th Amendment, with just 12 days left for President-elect Joe Biden to take office. Here's the report.
The unprecedented assault on the US Capitol by US President Donald Trump supporters and unforgettable scenes of the unruly mobs running riots at the highest podium of US democracy has shaken the entire world and the US too. It has not surprisingly also made Trump concede defeat finally. Now, after the dust has settled down and serious debates initiated in the US about punishing the culprits, Trump condemned the violence, which many believe he instigated with his rhetoric talks and speeches.
The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defiled the seat of American democracy. To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. And to those who broke the law, you will pay.
Trump's remarks arrived after top Democrats called for his removal from office following Wednesday's assault. And he faced growing calls for his removal and a staff exodus on Thursday. While Trump has just 13 days left in his term, there were numerous demands for his ouster. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called on Trump's removal via the 25th Amendment and added that impeachment was also an option. The Constitution's 25th Amendment allows cabinet ministers to oust a president who has been incapacitated.
In calling for this seditious act, the President has committed an unspeakable assault on our nation and our people. I join the Senate Democratic leader in calling on the Vice President to remove this president by immediately invoking the 25th Amendment. If the Vice President and the Cabinet do not act, the Congress may be prepared to move forward with impeachment.
Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer called on Vice President Mike Pence to remove Trump. Meanwhile, the list of officials quitting Trump's administration in protest at the storming of the U.S. Capitol by his supporters continues to grow. In a letter to Trump, United States Education Secretary Betsy DeVos resigned on Thursday. Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has extended the state of public emergency to 15 days, ending the day after President-elect Joe Biden's January 20th inauguration. Following a spate of violence at the U.S. Capitol, the FBI sought the public's help in identifying the pro-Trump rioters who stormed the U.S. Capitol. As the Justice Department said, a policy adopted in the summer to consider sedition charges for anti-racism protesters would also apply in this case. The FBI is offering a reward of up to $50,000 for information on who placed pipe bombs in the committee headquarters of U.S. political parties in Washington. The scenes at the U.S. Capitol will remain in the public memory for long. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
Well, let's take a look at, about this transition and the kind of concerns that are there in people's minds. Let's take a look a little bit at the background, try to put it into context. The U.S. presidential election, the January 6th, that's when the electoral votes were counted in the Congress, and that's when Joe Biden was confirmed as the president-elect. But the U.S. Capitol was also in chaos on that day. Hundreds of Trump supporters had entered the Capitol in a bid to overturn the election results, and then violence ensued. But on January 7th, the Congress confirmed Joe Biden's electoral win, and he became the president-elect. But, there are some concerns regarding the smooth transfer because the president and his allies had filed 62 lawsuits in state and federal courts. Of course, all of them were thrown out. The cases were dismissed for lack of jurisdiction, and many of them also were dismissed on merits. The lawsuits were filed against the 6 states where Biden seemed to have staged come-from-behind victories. He came from behind and won in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and this is what created the concern. Hours before the Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol, which was on the 6th, there were huge crowds that gathered at a Save America rally, which happened near the White House. And President Trump spoke there for around an hour, and following which these thousands of supporters went marching towards the Capitol. And several lawmakers, including Republicans, blamed Trump for the violence that ensued. Trump had vowed never to give up. He alleged that this election had been stolen from him. Theft was involved of votes and a lot of irregularities. And well, after this incident, the Trump administration has found some sort of problem with a number of the Trump administration resigning, including 2 cabinet positions, putting in their papers. But this has prompted also demands by the Democrats to invoke the 25th Amendment. What does the 25th Amendment of the U.S. Actually do? The 25th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, Section 4 states that the Vice President and the Cabinet can say that the President is no longer able to discharge duties. This section has never been invoked before, ever. The Vice President becomes the acting President, but we know that all this, it's a little too soon because the 20th of January is Inauguration Day. The 20th of January is Inauguration Day. The Vice President can become the acting President if the Cabinet and the Vice President decide that the President is unfit under the circumstances. Whether that's going to happen, we can try and understand. We'll try and put it into context. In focus tonight is the U.S. presidency transition with hope. Transition with hope is what we're going to be discussing. We have with us Arun Singh, former Indian ambassador to the United States, and Dr. Harinder Sikho is a senior consultant and strategic affairs expert with a specialization in U.S. relations. Ambassador Singh, Let's try and understand the situation in the United States. Would you say that, there is a likelihood that the 25th Amendment could be used?
A lot of demands are made. In fact, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, the Senate now Majority Leader, the Democratic Leader, Chuck Schumer, several congressmen, others have called for the 25th Amendment to be invoked. And their ground is, as you also indicated, that they believe that the president sort of incited the violence and attack on the Capitol that took place, and therefore he is no longer fit to govern. But, given the fact that there are only 12 days left, and the process of invoking the 25th Amendment can be complicated. The president can challenge that also. And then you have to ensure that there's a majority in the cabinet that will go along. And some will see their future in terms of distancing themselves from Trump. Others may not see their future the same way. So I think rather than getting into this very complicated and messy process, it would be better for everybody to work to constrain the kind of decision that President Trump might make. Okay. And I think that is already constrained. Several cabinet ministers are leaving. There is a sense that now there is a new president-elect who has gone through all the processes of the election, the electoral college, the Congress certification, and legally nothing stands in his way. So if the different institutions of the US government see that any order from President Trump is illegal, they can refuse to carry it out. And I think that would be a far more effective way. Because despite all the problems that have occurred, one fact has remained, that the institutions of the United States democracy eventually held their own. The courts refused to accept what President Trump and his supporters tried to do and have the elections declared as fraud and marred with irregularities. And large number of Republicans and the Republicans in the Senate stood up to the president and the vice president himself, because at the end, President Trump tried to generate a lot of pressure on the vice president to decertify the results, and he refused to do it. So the institutions of governance in the US held their own, and I think that's enough constraint on the powers of the president.
We listened to this soundbite of the President-elect Joe Biden, who has blamed Donald Trump for the breach of security that took place at the Capitol. Let's listen to what he said.
In my view, one of the darkest days in the history of our nation. An unprecedented assault on our democracy. An assault literally on the citadel of liberty in the United States Capitol itself. An assault on the rule of law. An assault on the most sacred of American undertakings, ratifying the will of the people in choosing the leadership of their government. All of us here grieve the loss of life, grieve the desecration of the people's house. But what we witnessed yesterday was not dissent, it was not disorder, it was not protest, it was chaos.
Well, Professor Harindra Sikko, Dr. Sikko, it looks like Joe Biden wants to press charges, one would think, and there was talk about sedition and treason. Will that be a wise thing to do in the sense, it could fuel a political slugfest, or even, maybe there are reports that suggest, once Donald Trump is out of office, and if this thing happens again, then he is actually very, very much liable to be, under prosecution. What would you say?
As has just been mentioned by Ambassador Arun Singh, I think the time is too short, and Joe Biden knows.
No, when he comes to power, I'm talking about in the future after he takes office.
The future, when he takes office, I think he's come on the plank of wanting to heal the nation, and until and unless there's another event of this magnitude, which is unlikely, because this was something which had been spurred by Donald Trump. And even the tweets of Ivanka Trump calling them patriots, calling these rioters patriots. I think they have learned their lesson. A very strong message has been sent by legislators across the political spectrum. Both Democrats and Republicans have come down and rallied behind the Constitution of the United States of America. So I doubt, and I think he's going to put this behind him.
Okay.
But I think it's left a deep impact, and there will be demands for an inquiry. So not immediately, but I think once he's settled in and after the State of the Union address, there is a constitutional provision for setting up an inquiry committee and bringing Trump, holding him accountable. But if Trump, during the next few days, pardons himself, gives himself a presidential pardon, I don't know if any charges could really be pressed, because I think Trump is basically, what we've noticed is he's a bit of a bully. And when he sees that things have slipped out of control, what he has said now is that he will, he's all for a smooth transition, and he's also condemned what happened, the level of violence. So I think Trump is going to try and extend the olive branch. I do not see him really getting impeached or prosecuted or something, but I think he is going to be restrained. He has already been restrained.
Ambassador Arun Singh, the transition, whether it's going to be peaceful, depends on the protesters, because the protesters came out in strength on the 6th. They may come out again on the 20th. But the point is that they don't believe they've done anything wrong. There are reports which say that they're constantly saying that they'll do it again just to make a political point. So the point is that they believe that this is the new form of democracy. They have to come out and protest. America is seeing this for the first time, perhaps, in a long time maybe, and they're not going to give in easily. What do you think? I mean, could they do something like this again on the 20th?
I think the state will be far better prepared this time. I think one of the problems was not just that the protesters indulged in violence, but clearly the police and the state was not adequately prepared to respond to that, because it was clear that something was going to happen on the 6th. Donald Trump was exhorting his supporters to come to Washington, and he said, see you on the 6th. It will be wild. And they should have anticipated. And I think the institutions of the state, perhaps because the protesters were seen as supporters of Donald Trump, did not quite take adequate measures to respond to that. And in the past also, there have been protests in the US on different occasions. There have been protests demanding civil rights. There have been protests demanding equality. There were protests during the Vietnam War. So protesters may come out, but the state would be far better equipped to deal with that. And I think the point you're trying to make, Mark, is that despite everything, despite all the criticism of Donald Trump, the fact remains that he got 74 million votes during this election. And of course, Joe Biden got 7 million votes more than him. But there are a large number of Americans who support Donald Trump because they believe that in the post-Cold War globalization phase, their wages stagnated, death rates went up, drug addiction went up, their longevity came down. So about 30-40% of the population in the United States felt they suffered from the processes in the US over the last 30-40 years. And they are now demanding that some of the policies that the US has adopted, trade-related policies, globalization policies, there's a need to walk back from that. And that's the sentiment that Trump had tapped into. And I think the challenge for Joe Biden would be to try and wean away the working class American from support to people like Donald Trump, work to delegitimize Donald Trump and his supporters politically. And that would be a far more effective way for him as he tries to build making US more competitive in terms of the inevitable challenge that they're going to face from China, the economic challenge, the technological challenge, the military challenge. And that is going to be the single most challenge that the single most important challenge that the US will face in the coming years. And the US system has to gear itself to respond to that.
Dr. Cinco, the Trump supporters, 74 million of them, they are also, there's the feeling that, they were leading in this election right up to the end, and then there was these come from behind victories. And that is the concern that actually is on people's minds. But the point is that the Democrats had actually won the elections right from the start. It was a question, the nature of counting, that caused this problem, to allow one party to have a significant lead and then the other party to come from behind and win. I mean, if the absentee votes and the votes that were cast through mail, etc., had been counted early, then the Democrats would have had this massive lead, and then the Republicans would have had to do the catching up. Would you say that there's some problem with the American counting system that's caused actually this entire problem in the start?
See, this election was held under very unprecedented and trying circumstances. They've never had so many mail-in ballots in the past. Because of COVID, this was necessary this time. And some of the states did not start counting because it's mandated in their constitution. They did not start counting the votes till the day of the voting. So after 4th November, they started the process of counting the mail-in ballots and the postal ballots which had come in. And those were, we all knew because the polls had predicted that those were mainly Democrat supporters. And when the initial results came and they were Republican, there was a lead by the Republicans, it was anticipated that once the other voting was completed, it would swing the ballots, and the swing states, that's exactly what has happened. It
was expected maybe by people, analysts like you and people who understood, but not the people on the street. That's the problem. That's the concern.
Because I think Trump has proved to be a very sore loser. Trump pretty well understands the process. He knows that there is a system, it's a flawed system of, electoral colleges, the winner takes all kind of a thing, which really polarizes the actual vote count, and 74 million to 81 million is still a difference of 7 million. We saw in 2016 that Hillary Clinton had the popular vote in her favor, but she still lost the election because of the electoral college. She lost on the electoral college count. So that is the American system.
But that is the American system. The electoral college is what matters, yes.
For Trump to kind of, show that there's been a voter fraud and trying to incite his vote bank, the masses who may not be so fine-tuned to understanding the nuances of the political system. So I think it has been encouraged right from the top, and the impact of this dastardly event is going to be felt for a very long time, because this is, we've seen that American society has been getting polarized over the last 4 years. Black Lives Matter.
True. So the polarization is likely to continue, Ambassador Arun Singh.
And it will take some time. I think it will take not just, it will take a couple of elections, but I think the Republican Party itself has decided to go for inward looking and soul searching to see how they kind of distance themselves from Trump. Now, if
that's a debate. I mean, let's bring in Ambassador Arun Singh on that, because Donald Trump has tweeted, Ambassador Arun Singh, that he's not going to be attending this inauguration. Definitely not. He says to all those who've asked, I will not be going for the inauguration on January 20. So he's set his agenda quite clear, and he's looking also at the next few years as building a political, building his political base, because he doesn't want to go out. He says that he's not going to give in at all. What do you think? I mean, is this going to create a serious problem for the Republican Party?
We'll have to watch how the Republican Party plays itself through the coming years, because one of the things that happened is that Donald Trump bent the Republican Party to his will. For the last 4 years, he completely dominated the party, and any Republican congressman or senator who opposed Donald Trump after that ended up losing Republican primaries and had to move out of the election process. And some important senators had the same fate. So at the moment, he's been dominating the party, but only now, towards the end of his tenure, we are seeing Republicans coming out of his shadow and very frankly criticizing him. And even Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, who's been very close to him. In the voting in the Senate on the 7th, he voted against Donald Trump. Mitch McConnell, the Republican Senate Majority Leader, who worked closely with Trump through the 4 years, led the Republicans in the Senate to vote against Donald Trump. So now they're trying to distance themselves from him. And Trump, even when he said that there will be a peaceful transition of power, said that he will continue to do the fight to have only legal votes counted. Therefore, the political strategy he has adopted to disenfranchise the minority voters and give, the white majoritarian sentiment in the US that somehow they are losing their rights as minorities in the US are gaining more rights, and they need to do something to try and protect that. So he'll try and use that kind of slogan to retain a base. So there will be, as many have described, a civil war within the Republican Party. And depending on how that plays out, will determine the next course of action in US politics.
Indeed. Dr. Sikko, so is it going to be, a civil war on the streets as well? Because, I mean, the kind of frenzy with which supporters of Donald Trump have come out onto the streets, though they claim that they have been basically just making a political point and they are not violent. The violence was actually the police trying to stop them. But the point is that, are we likely to see this getting much more dangerous, because even the Democrat war now will be strengthened once they come into power, and there will probably be, a desire to fight.
Definitely, because if you see in the last 4 years also, I mean, incidents of gun running have gone up, violence, the racial strife and demonstrations have increased exponentially in the last 4 years. And I think what we are going to notice is, these people will feel disenfranchised. And if Trump, he has said that he is a contender for the Republican nomination for the 24 election. So either the Republican Party, it depends to be seen, as Ambassador Arun Singh has just mentioned, whether they're going to be able to sort out the differences within the party and reconcile the two opposite sides of the spectrum within the party. And the man on the street, if he feels disenfranchised, does not like some of the policies, the healthcare, Obama's healthcare coming back, or the white 40% strong vote bank of the Republican Party of Donald Trump feels that they're losing out on jobs and on development assistance, or the factories are not doing so well. So I think those are the kind of people, they're going to be soft target, and they would protest. America is a vast country geographically, and I think we are going to witness a lot more strife and turmoil and agitations and protests, which will take some time to settle down.
Okay, a final word from you, Ambassador Arun Singh. Basically, America is pretty well divided. I mean, the blue and the red states remain the way they are, except for a few swing states which determine the elections. And we saw them swing very closely this time towards the Democrats. Do you think that that can be sustained? The Democrats will try and manage to, because they've just managed to keep Georgia in the Senate by, by a narrow margin once again. How do you, I mean, what does this actually say about the future?
Well, many analysts in the US have said that in terms of present breakup, the trends are towards the Democratic Party, because minorities, new immigrants tend to veer towards the Democratic Party, which works more on the basis of pluralism and inclusion. And because the Republican politics is based to some extent on reaching out to the more well-off sections of society and to white majoritarian sentiment. And so the trend tends to be Democratic, and that's why the larger number of votes, even though the Electoral College may go the other way, have been going to the Democrats. Hillary Clinton had 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. Joe Biden had 7 million more votes than Donald Trump. And even in 2000, when Al Gore lost to George Bush, just by 500 votes in Florida and the Electoral College in one state, overall, he had slightly higher percentage of voting than George Bush. So that is the tendency. But because of the nature of Electoral College, where every state has a certain weightage in terms of the number of votes they get, not just in terms of the number of people. So that has an influence. So I think this struggle in the US will carry on. And depending, but then again, people shift. The working class was by and large supporting the Democratic Party. But because of globalization, which was started by Bill Clinton, who was a Democrat, they went towards the Republican Party, and Donald Trump tapped into that. And Joe Biden will try and get the working class back. So we have to see how the shifts take place in terms of the interests of different sections of society.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, Ambassador Arun Singh and Dr. Harinder Sikko, for joining us and enlightening us on the transition of power in the United States. Moving on then to our next story, the second dry run before the vaccine rollout took place today across the country. The Health Minister Dr. Harshvardhan supervised the preparations in Chennai and Delhi. Union and state governments have been working very closely to see that this rollout is smooth. And before the nationwide rollout, the Prime Minister will be interacting with chief ministers and administrators, that's lieutenant governors of union territories and states. This will happen on Monday. Here's a report.
Before the nationwide rollout of the COVID vaccine, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will meet chief ministers of the states and administrators, lieutenant governors of union territories on Monday, 11th of January. These images are from different parts of the country prior to the corona vaccination program in the country. The biggest rehearsal took place on Friday, 8th January. The rehearsal took place in all districts of 33 states and union territories of the country. The dry run program was aimed at taking stock of the preparations with regard to vaccine transportation, its storage, registration of beneficiaries and medical assistance taken. Union Health Minister Dr. Harshvardhan himself took the baton with regard to vaccination preparations. While the Health Minister took stock of vaccination preparations in Chennai on Friday, January 8th, he also took part in the dry run in the national capital Delhi on 2nd January. During the dry run in Chennai, Union Health Minister visited the Government General Hospital, following which he visited a multi-speciality hospital in Omandarur. During this visit, Health Minister took stock of the precautions taken during vaccination and the medical assistance offered to people coming to vaccinate themselves in any adverse situation. He expressed satisfaction with the preparations and said that India has done a commendable job in development of vaccine in such a short time, and very soon vaccination will kick-start.
I saw that the preparations are in order. The manpower has been trained, all the required manpower up to the level of vaccinators and our grassroots workers, they are all adequately trained, all the guidelines have been followed, and the cold chain and the vaccine delivery systems are in order. We will commence vaccination at any moment.
Moving to capital Delhi, a dry run took place on Friday in LNJP Hospital along with AIIMS in the national capital.
So this is the area for vaccination, and the beneficiary is going to be vaccinated here. There's obviously going to be the vaccination officers. These are the preparations that we have shown you of the dry run, so that when the vaccine rolls out, it becomes a seamless procedure and people can be easily vaccinated.
Dry run was held in other parts of the country as well on Friday. These images reflect the fact that the entire country is fine-tuning preparations with regard to vaccination. A mock drill and rehearsal took place in Karnataka with regard to vaccination.
Over 1 lakh people have registered for vaccine in the state, and these are frontline workers, the healthcare workers who will be taking the vaccine in the first phase. Karnataka now is all set for the actual rollout process, and the government hopes that by the end of January the vaccination process will begin in the state across all the districts.
Prior to the vaccination rollout in Punjab and Mumbai as well, preparations for the final and decisive battle against COVID-19 was also reviewed.
हमारा सारा सिस्टम जड़ा पूरा प्रिपेयर्ड है, हमारी टीम्स प्रिपेयर्ड हैं, हमारे आदमी सारे ट्रेंड हैं, जो डमी ट्रेन किया जा रहा है मैं वो सारा फॉलो करके आया हूँ, बड़ा अच्छे तरीके से उन्होंने कहता स्टेप बाय स्टेप जो उनकी स्टेज है कि जहाँ पे ये होगा, जहाँ ये होगा,
बचाने का काम किया, सबको बचाने का काम किया। नहीं, यही तो पता करने के लिए हमारी आरोग्य जो चेयरमैन है बोरसकर, मैं खुद आई है, तो हम अभी देखेंगे।
Beneficiaries would be coming and then they are explained the entire process so that they don't have any fear in mind while taking the shots. So over here we can see after the person who has come for the registration and everything, the documents have been checked. We also have a health department's medical officer over here.
A total of 33 states and union territories across the country saw the nationwide dry run for the COVID vaccine on Friday. Earlier, the first phase of dry run was held in 125 districts of the country at 285 places on January 2nd. During this, the specially developed CoWIN app's real-time monitoring capacity was also tested. With the help of this app, direct monitoring of availability of vaccine all conditions with regard to requisite temperature at the time of its storage can be done. All states have been asked to be ready for getting the vaccine. 4 mega storage depots have been set up in Karnal, Mumbai, Chennai and Kolkata for storing the vaccine. Apart from this, 37 mega stores have been set up in states. The vaccination rollout against the pandemic will be done on a large scale across the country, and this vaccination drive for such a large population of the world will be the biggest ever exercise conducted so far. With Nitendra and Meghna in Delhi, Deepak in Bhopal, Kamal in Guwahati, Shyama in Mumbai and Philip Matthews in Chennai, Newsnight Desk, DD India.
India continues to report low daily cases and active caseload continues to decline. Only 18,139 persons were found positive in the last 24 hours in the country. The active caseload of the country stands at 2,25,449 today. The share of active cases in the total positive cases has further shrunk to 2.16%. With 20,539 recoveries in the last 24 hours, a net decline of 2,634 cases from the total active caseload was registered. The figure shows the change in the active cases in the last 24 hours. Total recoveries have crossed 1 crore mark recently. With the consistent rise in the daily recoveries, the number is exponentially increasing, and it stands at 10,037,398 today. And the recovery rate has also increased to 96.39%. 79.96% of the new recovered cases are observed and concentrated in 10 states and union territories. Well, an Air India flight from the UK landed in Delhi with 246 passengers on board amid concerns about a mutant, fast-spreading strain of the coronavirus that has emerged in Britain. Flights from the UK resumed today after the government suspended services between India and the UK on December 23 over the new and more contagious strain of the virus. The government has issued guidelines for passengers coming in from Britain. All passengers from the UK arriving between January 8 and January 30 will be subjected to self-paid COVID-19 tests on arrival. Passengers are also required to carry COVID-19 negative reports from a test done 72 hours before their journey and quarantine for 14 days, even if they test negative on arrival. This is according to the government's new SOP, Standard Operating Procedure. And the government conducted the 8th round of talks with agitating farmers, the 2nd in January. The last one was on the 4th of this month. The talks were inconclusive, unfortunately, despite the government having an open mind to incorporate amendments. The government has asked the agitating farmers to come up with alternatives other than repealing the laws. The agitation has been going on for 44 days, much of it in inclement weather.
The 8th round of talks between farmer organizations and the union government, led by Agriculture Minister Narendra Singh Tomar and Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, was held at Vigyan Bhavan in New Delhi. During the talks, the government appeared to be open to making amendments to the new farm laws to assuage the misgivings that the farmers have. It reiterated the commitment to welfare of farmers through farm reforms and asked them to share alternatives instead of insisting on repealing the 3 laws. However, no resolution emerged. The next round of talks will be held on 15th January.
सरकार का लगातार यह आग्रह रहा कि रिपील के अतिरिक्त कोई और विकल्प अगर यूनियन दे तो सरकार उस पर विचार करेगी। यूनियन और सरकार दोनों ने मिलकर ये तय किया है कि 15 जनवरी को पुनः दोपहर 12 बजे वार्ता के लिए इकट्ठा होंगे।
Union Agriculture Minister said that he was happy to interact with spiritual leader Baba Lakhvi Singh, who put across the point of view of farmers while expressing concern over the hardships they are facing because of the harsh weather. He said that the government has to take a final decision based on the fact that there are many farmers who are supporting the farm laws as well.
कृषि कानूनों पर आंदोलन है आंदोलन के जो पक्षकार हैं उनका मानना ये है कि ये कानून निरस्त किए जाने योग्य हैं। देश भर में बहुत सारे लोग इस पक्ष के हैं जो कानून का समर्थन कर रहे हैं। तो जो निरस्त किए जाने के पक्ष में हैं उन यूनियन से भी लगातार सरकार सम्मानपूर्वक वार्ता कर रही है। जो लोग समर्थन में खड़े हैं वो हमको जब अनुरोध भेजते हैं तो हम उनको भी मिलने का समय देते हैं।
But the farmers' organizations remained adamant on repealing the new agricultural laws.
10 तारीख को हमने एक बड़ी बैठक बुलाई है। 10 तारीख की बैठक में पूरे संगठनों के साथ चर्चा होगी और 15 तारीख को जो सरकार ने बुलाया है वार्ता के लिए उसमें जाना है अथवा नहीं जाना है यह भी हम तय करेंगे।
आफ्टर टुमारो यानी कल परसों अपनी बात करेंगे, अपनी मीटिंग करेंगे और इस बीच 11 तारीख को एक बड़ा सुप्रीम कोर्ट में सुनवाई होगी। उससे क्या निकलता है वो भी हमारी अगली बातचीत को असर डालेगा।
Farmers have been protesting for 44 days at the borders along Delhi. The government has continuously made efforts to find a solution during this period. Petitions related to the farm laws have also been filed in the Supreme Court of the country, which will be heard on 11th of January. Earlier on Thursday, the Supreme Court expressed concern over the gathering of farmers in the wake of COVID-19 and has sought a response from the government. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
The 16th Pravasi Bharatiya Divas convention will take place on January 9 and the theme this year is contributing to Atmanirbhar Bharat. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will inaugurate the convention on the 9th of January. It will have 3 segments. Pravasi Bharatiya Samman Awards will also be announced. President Ramnath Kovind will be delivering the valedictory address.
Pravasi Bharatiya Divas convention is the flagship event of the government to engage and connect with the overseas Indians. In view of the sentiments of a vibrant diaspora community, the 16th Pravasi Bharatiya Divas convention is being organized on 9th January 2021. In view of the ongoing COVID pandemic, the convention will be held in a virtual format. The theme of the 16th PBD Convention 2021 is Contributing to Atmanirbhar Bharat. PBD convention will have 3 segments. The PBD convention will be inaugurated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This year, the chief guest will be President of Suriname, Chandrika Persad Santokhi. He will also give his keynote address during the inaugural session. The winners of the online Bharat Ko Janiye quiz for the youth will also be announced. The inaugural session will be followed by 2 plenary sessions. The first plenary on role of diaspora in Atmanirbhar Bharat will feature addresses by External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal. The second plenary will be on facing post-COVID challenges, scenario in health, economy, social and international relations, and will be addressed by Health Minister Dr. Harshvardhan and Minister of State for External Affairs V. Muralidharan.
The world now appreciates India and Indians for their indomitable spirit, their sense of dedication, their patience and forbearance in the face of extreme hardships, and then their embracing culture and values. Our diaspora is indisputable achiever in fields ranging from healthcare to education, from technology to entertainment, and from social sector to politics. Its achievement and success encourage us to create a business, investment and economic climate which is as conducive to success as anywhere else in the world.
Both plenaries will feature panel discussions inviting eminent diaspora experts. The finale would be the valedictory session where President Ramnath Kovind will deliver his valedictory address to mark the occasion of Pravasi Bharatiya Divas. The names of the Pravasi Bharatiya Samman awardees for 2020-2021 will also be announced.
The 16th PBD convention is being organized tomorrow, that is the 9th of January. The event will be held in the virtual format. The theme of the 16th Pravasi Bharatiya convention is contributing to Atmanirbhar Bharat. The convention will have 3 segments. It will be inaugurated by PM and there will be a keynote address by the chief guest, Mr. Chandrika Persad Santokhi, President of Suriname. It will be followed by 2 plenary sessions. Rashtrapati ji will deliver his valedictory address at the final session to mark this occasion, and the names of Pravasi Bharatiya Samman awardees for 2021 will also be announced.
Pravasi Bharatiya Samman Awards are conferred to select Indian diaspora members to recognize their achievements and honor their contributions to various fields both in India and abroad. The Youth PBD is also being celebrated virtually on the theme Bringing Together Young Achievers from India and Indian Diaspora. The special guest for the event was Priyanka Radhakrishnan, Minister for Community and Voluntary Sector of New Zealand. Bureau Report, DD India.
India will chair 3 key subsidiary bodies of the United Nations Security Council. The United Nations has nominated India to chair the Taliban Sanctions Committee, the Counter-Terrorism Committee for 2022 and the Libya Sanctions Committee. These 3 committees are established subsidiary bodies on specific issues, including on sanctions regimes. India's permanent representative to the United Nations has expressed gratitude on the occasion, also informing about the relevance of India chairing these communities and committees, in fact, at this juncture.
The Taliban Sanctions Committee, also called the 1988 Sanctions Committee, has always been a high priority for India, keeping in mind our strong interest and commitment to peace, security, development and progress of Afghanistan. Our chairing this committee at this juncture will help keep the focus on the presence of terrorists and their sponsors threatening the peace process in Afghanistan. It has been our view that peace process and violence cannot go hand in hand. India will also chair the Counter-Terrorism Committee in 2022, which coincides with the 75th anniversary of India's independence. The chairing of this committee has a special resonance for India, which has not only been in the forefront of fighting terrorism, especially cross-border terrorism, but has also been one of its biggest victims. The Libya Sanctions Committee, also called the 1970 Sanctions Committee, is a very important subsidiary body of the Council which implements the sanctions regime, including a 2-way arms embargo on Libya, an assets freeze, a travel ban, measures on illicit export of petroleum, etc. We will be assuming the chair of this committee at a critical juncture when there is international focus on Libya and on the peace process.
The diplomatic advisor to the French President Emmanuel Macron, Emmanuel Bon, called on Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Prime Minister expressed his satisfaction on progress both countries have made in key aspects of the India-French strategic partnership, including counterterrorism, cybersecurity, defense and strategic cooperation. Bon also briefed the Prime Minister on India-France cooperation in various regional and global spheres, including maritime and multilateral cooperation. Prime Minister fondly recalled his recent exchanges with President Macron and conveyed his best wishes for his health. He also reiterated his invitation to President Macron to visit India as soon as the conditions improve and permit. Emmanuel Bon is on a visit to India for the India-France Strategic Dialogue. On the 7th of January it happened. Well, Mumbai attack mastermind and the Lashkar-e-Taiba operations commander Zakir-ul-Rahman Lakhvi. He was sentenced to 15 years in jail on Friday by a Pakistani anti-terrorism court. This is on terror financing charges and that case. The LET commander was accused of running a dispensary and using those funds collected for terror financing. Lakhvi was designated as a global terrorist by the UN in December of 2008 for being associated with the LET and Al-Qaeda and for participating and financing, planning, facilitating, preparing and perpetrating acts of violence by or in conjunction with, under the name of or on behalf or in support of both these entities. Talking to reporters at the weekly press briefing, the Ministry of External Affairs' spokesperson, Anurag Srivastava, said that it has become a routine for Pakistan to come with such farcical actions prior to important meetings. The ME spokesperson said that the UN proscribed entities and designated terrorists act as proxies for the Pakistan establishment to fulfill its anti-India agenda. It is for the international community to hold Pakistan to account and to ensure that it takes credible action against these terror groups.
It has become routine for Pakistan to come up with such farcical actions prior to important meetings. UN proscribed entities and designated terrorists act as proxies for Pakistani establishment to fulfill its anti-India agenda. It is for the international community to hold Pakistan to account and ensure that it takes credible action against terror groups, terror infrastructure, and individual terrorists.
The Union Minister of Information and Broadcasting, Prakash Javadekar, launched the digital calendar and diary of the Government of India for Android and iOS mobile applications. The government calendar that has adorned the walls in the past will now adorn mobile phones. In line with Prime Minister's vision of Digital India, Union Minister of Information and Broadcasting Prakash Javadekar launched the digital calendar and diary of the Government of India. He also unveiled the Android and iOS mobile applications of the calendar and diary.
जनवरी का महीना थीम है एक्टिंग ईस्ट एंड एक्टिंग फास्ट। अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी जी के वो मंथ की पर्सनालिटी है। फरवरी की पर्सनालिटी रविंद्रनाथ टैगोर है और अन्नदाता सुखी भव ये थीम है। मार्च में स्वामी विवेकानंद है और नारी टू नारायणी ये थीम है। ऐसे 12 महीनों के 12 थीम्स है। सरकार ने क्रांतिकारी बदलाव किए हैं, 100 से ज़्यादा ऐसे काम किए हैं कि जिससे भारत में परिवर्तन आया है। उन 100 लगभग कार्यक्रमों के हर महीने में कब लॉन्च हुए उसकी तारीख भी है।
The app will do away with the need for a new calendar every year. Further, each month will carry a theme and an accompanying message and will feature one famous Indian personality. The app will also inform people about the timeline of the launch of various government programs. Because of the diary feature, the calendar is certainly more advanced, more feature-laden and easier compared to other digital calendar apps.
ये सबके लिए यूज करने के लिए फ्री है। पहले ये पंचायत तक पहुंचता था, हम इतना छापते थे, कागज खर्च करते थे। कागज भी पेड़ से ही मिलता है, तो पेड़ कटते थे। अब धीरे धीरे हमारे यहाँ ऑफिसेस में पेपरलेस गवर्नेंस आ गया।
The application currently available in Hindi and English will soon be made available in 11 other Indian regional languages. The other interesting feature is its wide reach. While the earlier physical version of the Government of India calendar had a limited reach up to the panchayat level in the country, the digital avatar of the calendar in the form of this app will be available to anyone across the world. Apart from providing latest information on various schemes, events and publications of Government of India and the information about official holidays and various important dates, the calendar will also help people in better planning and scheduling with reminders and other features. Shailendra Mishra's report, DD India. Well, the government has approved a central sector scheme for industrial development of Jammu and Kashmir. It's till the year 2037 and it costs about 28,400 crore rupees. The scheme markets Jammu and Kashmir as an investment destination, also nurturing existing industries. Let's look at this report.
The Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir is now moving on the path of progress and prosperity following abrogation of Articles 370 and 35A of the Constitution in 2019. The Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, chaired by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has approved the proposal for Central Sector Scheme for Industrial Development of Jammu and Kashmir. The present scheme is being implemented with the vision that industry and service-led development of J&K needs to be given a fresh thrust with emphasis on job creation and skill development.
इस पैकेज के माध्यम से एक ऐसी ज़रूरत को पूरा किया गया है, एक ऐसी रिक्वायरमेंट का जिसका एहसास कई बरसों से था, लेकिन इस पर कोई तवज्जो नहीं दी गई गत सरकारों के द्वारा। इससे ये बात भी प्रमाणित होती है कि कितनी संवेदनशीलता से, कितनी प्राथमिकता से, कितनी गंभीरता से प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जम्मू कश्मीर और लद्दाख के जो नए केंद्र शासित प्रदेश हैं उनको विकसित करके दूसरे विकसित क्षेत्रों के स्तर पर लाने के लिए तत्पर हैं।
The scheme is approved with a total outlay of Rs 28,400 crore up to the year 2037. The main purpose of the scheme is to generate employment. It is anticipated that the proposed scheme is likely to attract unprecedented investment and give direct and indirect employment to about 4.5 lakh persons. The scheme will be enabling J&K to compete nationally with other leading industrially developed states and union territories of the country. Scheme is made attractive for both smaller and larger units. Smaller units with an investment in plant and machinery up to Rs 50 crore will get a capital incentive up to Rs 7.5 crore and get capital interest subvention at the rate of 6% for maximum 7 years. The scheme has been simplified on the lines of ease of doing business by bringing one major incentive, GST-linked incentive, that will ensure less compliance burden without compromising on transparency. The scheme is to bring about radical transformation in the existing industrial ecosystem of J&K. Additionally, because of working capital interest subvention, the scheme is likely to give indirect support to about 35,000 persons. With inputs from Neeraj Singh, News Night Desk, DD India.
Winter snow has brought tourists back to Kashmir after a year-long lull following the revocation of Article 370 and the novel coronavirus disease. That's the pandemic, COVID-19. Now, the ski resort at Gulmarg has seen a rush. The inflow of tourists has persuaded the tourists and the tourist department to open both phases of the Gulmarg gondola from Gulmarg to Kongdur and from Kongduri to Afrawat. Hotels in Gulmarg also are looking much better. They're booked till March, in fact. Let's take a look at what's making news across the country. Here's our national roundup.
Defence Minister Rajnath Singh launched the online portal for purchase of items from CSD canteens. The objective of the launch of this online portal is to enable about 45 lakh CSD beneficiaries, including serving and retired persons from armed forces and serving civilian defence employees, to purchase against firm demand items from the comfort of their home. Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla has said that democracy in India is among the strongest and most empowered democracies of the world. He quoted Gandhi, citing the soul of India resides in the village. He further hailed the Uttarakhand government for providing higher reservations to women. BJP National President JP Nadda will be visiting West Bengal's Purba Bardhaman district on Saturday to launch the party's new campaign aimed at wooing farmers amidst the ongoing protest over the contentious agriculture laws. During his day-long visit, he would also hold a rally at Katwa and a roadshow at Bardhaman town. The Supreme Court on Friday asked the centre to decide before 26 January on the plea seeking commutation of the death penalty of Balwant S. Rajauna, who is convicted in the assassination case of former Punjab Chief Minister Bean Singh. Uttar Pradesh police has arrested the main accused Satya Narayan in Badayu gang rape late night on Thursday. According to the DM, he was hiding in the house of his follower in a village under Ughete police station, from where he was picked up.
Well, it was a fascinating day of cricket, day 2 of the Sydney Test between India and Australia at the Sydney Cricket Ground. Marcus Labuschagne, who was overnight not out on 61, 67, and Steve Smith, who was not out on 31. They went on to put on a big partnership, and it was the Indian bowlers who fought back after getting that vital breakthrough, getting one out for 91, and the other went on to hit a century. But then after that, Ravindra Jadeja got him run out, and then the Australian middle order collapsed and the rest of the batting collapsed, and India were able to put them all out for 338 despite a massive partnership between those two for much of the day. But then the visitors, that's India, got into the act, and Rohit Sharma did really well to start with, up to tea, and Shubham Gill. They were looking very solid for a long partnership, but unfortunately Rohit Sharma got out early. But Shubham Gill went on to hit a half-century, and at close India had Cheteshwar Pujara and Ajinkya Rahane at the crease. 96 for 2 is the score. And with that we conclude. Thanks very much for being with us. Namaskar.